So far, we have looked at what happens when we die, what we will be like for eternity, and who will be with us and what we will be doing. Today, we will focus on one final thing, the venue, so to speak, of our eternal existence. In other words, where will we be spending eternity and what will this place be like? But before we go into that, let's understand one thing about eternity. There are two parts to eternity. The eternity of the future has two parts. The first part starts at the rapture, when all believers are taken up to heaven. This section of eternity goes right up to the conclusion of the millennial kingdom. After the judgments that take place after the millennium, God will destroy the existing heaven and the earth and replace it with a new heaven and a new earth. So, the second part of eternity starts with the coming into being of a new heaven and new earth onwards. This part of eternity begins about 1007 years after the rapture. This age will never end. It will go on forever. This division of eternity is important because there will be changes in where we will spend eternity. The existing heaven will be replaced by a new heaven. So let's start looking at heaven itself. Where is heaven? This is the earth, a blue jewel in the darkness of space. Our planet is a little dot in the solar system, of which the sun is the main star. The sun is a small dot in a galaxy known as the Milky Way, which consists of 200 billion stars. The Milky Way galaxy is in turn another small dot in a section of the universe like this, which represent about 1/32 million of the known universe. Where is heaven? Is it in the solar system? Is it in the Milky Way? Is it in another galaxy? Heaven is not located in our present universe. It exists in another dimension. In other words, it is not in the solar system, nor in the Milky Way, nor in some other galaxy in this universe. Can we build a spaceship that can take us to heaven? No. You can only go to heaven when God Himself takes us there. This will happen in one of two ways: when we die, or when we are caught up to heaven in the rapture. So let's look at what is in heaven. We are fortunate that the Bible gives us a glimpse of what is in heaven. However, that may not be the full picture. Heaven may be more than that. Nevertheless, what has been revealed most likely shows us the center of heaven. Since we noted that there are two parts to eternity, let's now look at the first part, that is the existing heaven. Heaven, as it is, has a limited time span. As we have seen earlier, it is due to be replaced by a new heaven about 1007 years after the rapture. The common idea of heaven is that it is a mystical place with spirits floating around clouds. If the people in heaven exist only in spirit form, why do you need a physical place? We have seen earlier that we will have physical bodies in heaven. If people in heaven have physical bodies, then it makes sense that heaven is a physical place. Physical bodies need a physical environment. A cloudy, formless, non-physical environment is no place for physical beings. In addition, Christ is there. He exists in physical form as the God-man. His body will have scars. They will be the scars from the nails that pierce his hands and his feet, and the thorns that pierce his head. There are certain things in heaven which imply that they can only exist if heaven is a physical place. Revelation chapters 4 and 5 tell us about a throne room. John was taken in spirit to heaven to view and then later to write about the events in heaven. Revelation chapter 4 verse 2 says, "At once I was in the spirit, And there before me was a throne in heaven with someone sitting on it. Verse 4. Surrounding the throne were 24 other thrones, and seated on them were 24 elders. They were dressed in white and had crowns of gold on their heads. In these verses are mentioned thrones, elders seated on thrones, elders prostrating and laying their crowns on the ground. All this cannot exist in a non-physical environment. There must be an actual place on which ground are placed thrones and on which ground the elders fall down. What we see here is the court of God, in which the throne of God occupies the central place. Present in the throne room of God are persons honored by God, elders representing the church. Also present are the angelic beings who guard the throne of God. This is the center of heaven. This is the place where all the activities in heaven happen. There is also another structure in heaven which is mentioned in the Bible. Revelation chapter 15 verse 5 says this: After this I looked, and I saw in heaven the temple, that is the tabernacle of the covenant law, and it was opened. Even before the book of Revelation, the writer of the book of Hebrews talked about the tabernacle in heaven. Hebrews chapter 8 verse 1 says, We do have such a high priest who sat down at the right hand of the throne of the majesty on high, and who serves in the sanctuary, the true tabernacle set up by the Lord, not by a mere human being. Verse 5, They, that is the earthly priests, serve at a sanctuary that is a copy and a shadow of what is in heaven. This is why Moses was warned when he was about to build the tabernacle. See to it that you make everything according to the pattern shown you on the mountain. There is a tabernacle in heaven. When Moses was commanded by God to build a tabernacle on earth, Moses was instructed to model it after the tabernacle in heaven, which was shown to him. Thus, the tabernacle in heaven is the original, and the tabernacle on earth is a copy. There is a high priest who serves in the heavenly tabernacle, and that is none other than Jesus Christ. When Christ is mentioned as the great high priest in the book of Hebrews, it does not mean that he is the high priest of the earthly tabernacle. He cannot be, as he is not from the tribe of Levi, nor a descendant of Aaron. He is priest of a greater tabernacle, the tabernacle in heaven. This is the original. The earthly tabernacle is only a copy. Hebrews chapter 9 verse 11 to 12 tells us, But when Christ came as high priest of the good things that are now already here, he went through the greater and more perfect tabernacle that is not made with human hands. That is to say, is not a part of this creation. He did not enter by means of the blood of goats and calves, but he entered the most holy place once for all by his own blood, thus obtaining eternal redemption. For Christ did not enter a sanctuary made with human hands that was only a copy of the true one. He entered heaven itself, now to appear for us in God's presence. After his resurrection, Christ went into the tabernacle in heaven to offer his blood shed on the cross as a sacrifice for sin. The throne of God and the heavenly tabernacle are mentioned together in the vision of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 6 verse 1 says, In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. This cannot refer to the earthly tabernacle, because the earthly tabernacle has no throne and no angels flying inside it. Further, if it was the earthly tabernacle, God would be breaking the laws he gave regarding the earthly tabernacle by allowing Isaiah, who was not from the priestly tribe, to be inside it. However, the heavenly tabernacle has no such restrictions for the simple reason that the people in heaven are worthy persons and their heavenly privileges would likely include the right to enter the heavenly tabernacle. Now let's look at the new heaven. At the end of the 1,000-year millennial kingdom, the judgment of unbelievers will take place. When the universe has been purged of sinners, Satan, and fallen angels, God will recreate or renew the entire created order. Revelation chapter 21 verse 1 says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea." This is not the first time that scripture talked about this. 700 years earlier, Isaiah said this in Isaiah chapter 65 verse 17. "See, I will create new heavens and a new earth. The former things will not be remembered, nor will they come to mind." Isaiah chapter 66 verse 22. "As the new heavens and the new earth that I make will endure before me, declares the Lord, so will your name and descendants endure." It is understandable that the earth needed to be renewed. The final rebellion by Satan and his human army against God at the end of the 1,000-year millennial kingdom must have resulted in a battle that devastated the earth so badly that the only way to restore the earth was to demolish it and start all over again. How will the new heaven and the new earth come about? 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 10 tells us, "But the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will disappear with a roar. The elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and everything in it will be laid bare." Verse 12. "That day will bring about the destruction of the heavens by fire, and the elements will melt in the heat." Verse 13. "But in keeping with his promise, we are looking forward to a new heaven and a new earth where righteousness dwells." In the Bible, the word heaven refers to three things. The first heaven is the sky or the atmosphere surrounding the earth. The second heaven is space with the stars and the planets. The third heaven is the place where God lives. So, which heaven will be destroyed? Many people suggested that it's the first and the second heaven. I believe that the heaven that will be destroyed by fire and be replaced by a new heaven is the very place where God lives. Why do I say that? We understand that the earth, having been contaminated by sin, is badly in need of renovation. But what about heaven? Isn't heaven a holy place? Isn't heaven perfect? Why does it need renovation? Revelation chapter 12 verse 10 tells us, "Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brethren, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down." The words "before our God" means in the presence of God. The devil is able to set his evil feet in heaven to accuse believers. His malicious voice has sounded in the throne room of heaven. Remember the book of Job? Satan comes into the presence of God in heaven to accuse Job. Revelation chapter 12 verse 7 tells us, "Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back." War broke out in heaven. This can mean only one thing: an invasion of heaven by the devil and his fallen angels. It will fail, of course. Heaven is not spared the intrusion of sin and the presence of evil in its premises. Because it is the dwelling place of God, sin does not triumph in heaven. On top of that, judgment of sin, a very unpleasant but necessary thing, emanates from heaven. Revelation chapter 14 verse 17 says, "Another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle." Revelation chapter 15 verse 1, "I saw in heaven another great and marvelous sign, 7 angels with the 7 last plague, last because with them God's wrath was completed." After the great white throne judgment that takes place after the end of the millennial kingdom, sin will finally be eradicated from all creation. Sinners, unbelievers, the devil, fallen angels, demons, and all kinds of unclean spirits will be consigned and confined to the lake of fire, the eternal place of judgment. The creation, including heaven, tainted by the existence of sin and things related to sin, needs to be cleansed and made new. Revelation chapter 21 verse 5 says, "He who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new." The new heaven and the new earth will not only be cleansed of the presence of sin, but because it is new, there will be no memory of anything connected with sin or judgment. A final argument for the destruction of heaven by fire and its replacement by a new heaven is this. Earlier we saw that there is a tabernacle or temple in the existing heaven. In fact, the tabernacle that Moses built was a copy of the tabernacle in heaven. In the new heaven, the heavenly tabernacle or temple is gone. Revelation chapter 21 verse 22 says, "I did not see a temple in the city, because the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple." There will be changes in heaven. It will affect us because heaven is our eternal home. Although we don't have much information about the existing heaven, we do know that there is a tabernacle and a throne room. Is this all there is in heaven? I think heaven is much bigger than that. Heaven is a world of its own. There may even be a city where the heavenly tabernacle and the throne room is located. As the tabernacle on earth is a copy of the tabernacle in heaven, could not our very earth, the world, as originally created by God and before Adam sinned, be a copy of heaven? Moses was told by God to build the tabernacle according to what was shown to him. Moses had cherubim, trees, and fruits embroidered into the curtains inside the sanctuary of the tabernacle. Moses saw a world in heaven and replicated what he saw in the way he built the tabernacle. In Revelation 21 and 22, the new heaven seems to be compressed into this thing called the Holy City, the New Jerusalem. Is there more to heaven than the New Jerusalem? I think there is, but the center of heaven will be shifted and focused in the New Jerusalem. The dwelling place of God will be moved to the New Jerusalem. The crucial activities heaven will take place there. Revelation chapter 21 verse 1 to 4 says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away.'" This is where it gets complicated. I told you that right now, we are in this physical universe. Heaven is not in this universe. To use the language of Hollywood and science fiction, it is in another dimension. Something of heaven will break through the barrier that separates heaven from our universe. Something heavenly will enter our universe. This thing is called this New Jerusalem. 2,000 years ago, the Son of God from heaven broke through into our universe and became a man. After the millennium, the centerpiece of heaven will break through and enter our universe. In Revelation chapter 21 and 22, everything about heaven seems to be concentrated in this city. Is the New Jerusalem the entire new heaven? Or is the New Jerusalem just a part of the new heaven? The last two chapters of Revelation does not give any clues. Whatever it is, heaven will come within the sight and reach of men when the New Jerusalem appears above the earth and becomes a permanent fixture there. We need to learn about this city because that is where we will live for eternity. Presumably, there will still be the city of Jerusalem on earth. It will continue to serve as the capital of Israel. It will be the heart of the nation of Israel. While Israel inhabits the earthly Jerusalem, who will inhabit the New Jerusalem? Revelation chapter 21 verse 2 says, I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. It is not difficult to identify the New Jerusalem. She will come from heaven and from the presence of God. She is described as a bride. There is only one community that fits this description, and it will be the church in heaven. Revelation chapter 21 verse 14 says, the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. The New Jerusalem will be built upon the foundations of the 12 apostles. This is the church that is described in the book of Ephesians. In other words, the New Jerusalem will be the church that will be taken up to heaven in the event known as the rapture. Thus, the New Jerusalem will be the eternal dwelling place of the church, our eternal home. Since we will be given physical bodies with heavenly characteristics, it makes perfect sense that our eternal dwelling place will be a physical city with heavenly characteristics. What will the New Jerusalem be like? Chapter 21 verse 16 says, the city was laid out like a square, as long as it was wide. He measured the city with a rod and found it to be 12,000 stadia, or 1,500 miles, or 2,400 kilometers in length, and as wide and as high as it is long. The dimensions of length, breadth, and height of equal length means that the city will be in the shape of a cube, 1,500 miles long on every side. The length of each side is about the distance from here to Hong Kong. Where exactly will the city be? It will be suspended between heaven and earth. Revelation chapter 21 verse 2 says, I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues came and said to me, come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. Verse 10, and he carried me away in the spirit to a mountain great and high, and showed me the holy city Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God. The words coming down is in what we call the present continuous tense. In other words, it is always coming down, perpetual motion, always moving. We know that when an aeroplane comes down, it will land on the earth sooner or later. The New Jerusalem does not land on the earth. It has the appearance of coming down or descending because it is orbiting the earth. People everywhere on the earth will get to see the New Jerusalem in the sky above them. When it first appears over the horizon, it is a little speck in the sky. It will then get bigger and bigger as if it is coming down. Eventually, as it orbits the earth, people in other parts of the earth will see the same thing, the city in the sky approaching them. What is this city made of? The architecture of the New Jerusalem is expressed in the most luxurious of terms. The foundations and the walls of the city will be made of precious stones. Its streets are made of gold. This is to express the beauty, quality, and perfection of this city. Imagine that you are traveling on a spaceship and are approaching the earth from outer space. As the earth comes into view, you see a golden cube-like structure orbiting the earth. This is the New Jerusalem. The heart and life of the city is God Himself. All this time we know that heaven is the dwelling place of God, but it is separated from man. We cannot see it. We don't even know where it is. Revelation chapter 21 verse 3 says, "And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and He will dwell with them." In the New Jerusalem, God will dwell among and with glorified men, the church and spirits of Old Testament saints. On earth, men will be able to see God's city in the sky. God will be near and within reach. Thus, the promise that God will dwell among men will be fulfilled in the New Jerusalem. What will life be for us in the New Jerusalem? The worship of God takes on a new meaning. Revelation chapter 21 verse 22 says, "I did not see a temple in the city, because the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple." In the existing heaven, there is a tabernacle. The shed blood of Christ was sprinkled in the most holy place as an offering to God for the sins of men. In the New Jerusalem, there will be no temple. God will dwell in the city with glorified men and women. Christ will also be there. We will enjoy the eternal presence of God and Christ. We will worship God face to face. Here we see an important point. People think worship of God has to do with a place or rituals or forms. The Jews thought that God can only be found in the tabernacle. Today, Christians think that God is found in music, stagecraft, numbers, organization, church structures or systems, or even in a church leader. Heaven is not about the place. Heaven is all about God. In the new heaven where the purest worship will exist, even the heavenly tabernacle, which many would consider as sacred, will be done away with. In the new heaven, God Himself comes and lives among men in fulfillment of the name Emmanuel, which means God with us. In the presence of God, without any intermediary or structures or symbols to distract us, we will experience pure worship. There will also be no night and day. As the earth rotates on its axis, those parts of the earth that faces away from the sun is in darkness. What happens when the New Jerusalem revolves around the side of the earth facing away from the sun? Will the city be in darkness? Revelation chapter 21 verse 23 says, "The city does not need the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and the Lamb is its lamp." There will be no need for natural light or artificial light. Heavenly light from God the Father and Christ the Son will light up the entire city. Darkness has always been associated with sin. In the new heaven, there is no more sin. Thus, there is no more darkness. There is perpetual light, and God is the source. Everyone dwelling in the New Jerusalem will walk in the light of God. I hope you can see the breadth and the scope of God's plan for the future. God's plan is not only for the redemption of people, but the redemption of their environment as well. All things affected by sin will be redeemed and renewed. Sin will not only be eliminated, we and the created order will become what God intended us to be had sin not entered the picture. For eternity, everything will be perfect. Humanity, the environment of earth and the universe, and also heaven, where God dwells with glorified humanity. This is what we are waiting for, and this is where we will be forever.